Welcome to the second episode of Futurecast. I have with me Hjalmar Gislason, the co-founder and CEO of Grid. I don't think I need to introduce Hjalle, but I think he'll do a good job himself. Hjalle, welcome to Futurecast, the second episode that we are launching from Iceland.
Thank you, Bala.
You're listening to the Futurecast.
Tell me a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and what you're doing now. Maybe we start with a little bit of a backstory to how it led to where you are today.
Yeah, so I've been starting companies more or less my whole life. So Grid is my fifth as a founder. Started my first company when I was 20. It was a gaming company, as you do when you're 20. And then kind of gradually going through bigger projects as kind of time passed. And I think maybe the story that's relevant here starts with Data Market, which I founded back in 2008. Well, Data Market was an early, what would now be called a data as a service company. And we were aggregating data, especially numerical data from all sorts of kind of public and private sources, helping people to get kind of a numerical view on what's happening outside their organizations, whereas kind of BI is more internally focused. Built it up in Iceland, used Iceland as a test market at that point, and then kind of when we had the product to sell, I moved to the States, to Boston, set up sales and marketing there. It was in 2012, and then in 2014, Data Market got acquired by Click. Then publicly traded on Nasdaq, actually a Swedish originated company, but kind of by that time quite American. Took on a role there as VP of product and stayed on for 3 more years, which is where I kind of really think I got into the kind of analytics market, and that's where the idea for Grid came about.
So what is Grid?
So Grid is essentially the realization we came to, or I came to, is that even though I was entering, when I joined Click, I was entering one of those companies that were kind of supposed to be making the most accessible and most approachable software for working with data and analytics. There's still power user tools. There's still a pretty high barrier to entry and kind of a learning curve to get to start using them. So that means that a few people within each organization learn how to use them, and they then become the go-to people within their organization when anybody has to do anything with data. And then that becomes a bottleneck. Now you have to wait for a meeting. Now you have to kind of they have a lot of projects going on and so on. So you're not as well off as you would think with kind of what was supposed to be self-service data work and analytics. And then when you look at what kind of the everyday office worker is doing, everything they do with data, it happens in spreadsheets. And that was kind of the realization. And then it took a little while to kind of dig into that market and kind of understand what can be done with that fact, because there are roughly 1 billion people in the world, believe it or not, that use spreadsheets for all sorts of stuff. There are, you don't have to spend a lot of time in business or around spreadsheets to understand that they also have a lot of shortcomings. And there's a lot of friction between the centrally focused kind of BI and IT roles and even management and auditing and so on. And then all of the people at the edges of the enterprise that are working with the spreadsheets, just getting stuff done in their everyday work. So that's kind of the gap we're here to bridge. Where we're focusing first is that a lot of people, actually 88% of spreadsheet users, according to a survey I read, say that when they're asked, they say they make spreadsheets, they often make spreadsheets to share them with others. And that's kind of the moment we're focusing on, because that moment when, today it normally happens, you take your Excel file and you attach it to an email, and that's how you kind of distribute the data you've pulled together, or the analysis you've done. But that means you're giving up a lot of control. You don't know what happens to it. After that, people will look at it wrong, and they will kind of, be looking at your formulas, and there are all sorts of stuff, that you either have to clean out, or, they shouldn't be nosing around in. And it doesn't help you to tell a story. So what people do to overcome that, if they don't like that balance, is they start copy pasting things out of spreadsheets into PowerPoints and PDF, and distributing those instead. And that's, that gives you full control over the narrative and what people are looking at and so on. But then you have disconnected the data from the underlying spreadsheet. You don't have, it's tedious to make, it's tedious to update. And you don't have the interactivity anymore if there's modeling going on.
So more or less the new workflow
Yep.
is now become a hodgepodge of many tools,
Yep.
trying to piece it all together
Yes.
and trying to tell a story.
Yep.
And so you guys are trying to make that an easier thing to do.
Yeah, and in some ways we're trying to we're looking at spreadsheet users and we're giving them tools that give them superpowers. They can now do more without having to learn any new skills or any new
Just
tools.
use the same spreadsheet interface to do more things.
Yeah.
Very cool. I mean, the interesting aspect about something like this is so real. So there's a large addressable market.
Sure.
And big people are playing in this space. We're talking about Microsoft, you're talking about Google. And tell me a little bit about, what made you think that you could go after this?
Right. So first of all, and I kind of very much believe in that approach, you have to understand kind of the ecosystem and where you can live in it. So we're not going head to head against somebody like Microsoft or Google. Google hasn't even done a good job of going head to head with Microsoft in this market. But we realize that the spreadsheets are there, people are using them, and we're giving them something on top. So, if we execute this correctly, then somebody like Microsoft or Google should actually like what we're doing, because we're giving people that are using those tools additional capabilities. However, nothing interesting has ever happened kind of in the world of spreadsheets without being backwards compatible. There's so many people that have tried to kind of go after that market and try to make something that is not a spreadsheet or supposed to be a better spreadsheet or something like that. And that's just never worked. You can take a full lineage all the way back to 40 years ago, and VisiCalc was originally put out there. There is a full lineage of kind of backwards compatibility. The way you write formulas in Excel and Google Sheets today is very much the same way as you wrote formulas 40 years ago in the very first spreadsheet.
So I guess technology doesn't take jumps. It basically just becomes like a weed and spreads, and then that becomes the standard we all follow.
Yeah, in some ways, but there are also some kind of there is a conceptual genuity in kind of how the spreadsheet was originally made. So I think that's also kind of what keeps it together. There's a very strong concept there that essentially allows people to program without being programmers.
Right.
But that's what you're doing. When you write a spreadsheet formula, you're coding, you just don't know it.
Yeah, exactly. I want to jump back a little bit and talk about the entrepreneurial journey. And you started a company when you were 20.
Yep.
So what was the inspiration? Why would you do that? I mean, 20. So when you were 20, I don't want to date you, but
Well, you can. I will. So it has a lot of this has to do with role models and inspiration, and I think that's actually a super important part of this. I was coming out of college around the time Oz was a pretty both a pretty impressive but also a very visible company in the Icelandic market, and then kind of they were heading towards the kind of .com boom, and just seeing somebody that was going after like a big dream and a big kind of playing on the same playing field as the companies you were reading about in the tech media was a big inspiration. I think that was a very big part of kind of getting the tech scene started here, was having at least one company that was really kind so had big dreams and was going.
So this was like in the late 90s.
Yeah, the late 90s. So my first company started in I think December 96 rather than January 97. So it's kind of that's about when we were starting, and that's. So that was kind of early days for both the .com boom, but also for Oz.
Yeah. So kind of Oz is kind of like the grandfather of a number of founders.
Absolutely.
That have started CCP, number of other companies that we can talk about.
A lot of them. I mean, former Oz employees made a family chart of kind of companies coming out of there, and it's fascinating to see where people have gone and kind of you can trace groups of people, or at least kind of founders and leaders that were inspired or a part of Oz back then, and you can trace them to pretty much everything that's happening in tech, except for the kind of younger founders where they've then been kind of learning from those
That's
people.
Cool. I guess that is one of those things that you guys need to go back and write a book about Oz, how it started it all in Iceland.
I think that would actually be a fun book to read. There are a lot of stories.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there are. Like every build-up, there's lots of stories. Let's jump a little bit forward now. You guys are now in an exciting time. There's some event that has happened, and you've written about it, and a lot of people are referring to that. I think that's great. So can you tell a little bit about the company event in Grid that you guys just did?
Yeah. So maybe just a little bit of a kind of the corporate story behind Grid. So we started Grid almost to the date 2 years ago now, so September 2018. That's when the first two of us, me and my lead client developer, sat down and started hammering away on our keyboards. There had been quite a lot of kind of thinking that went into it. So what we're building is, I wouldn't say that I had in my mind exactly what we've built, but we're very much kind of going after that same opportunity and building something for the same problem as we set out to do 2 years ago. Then, fairly quickly we raised an angel round of $1 million. About half of that came from Iceland, about half of that from abroad, all from people that I have worked with before. We used that to kind of grow the team a little bit and get the alpha out the door. And while we were doing that, just from the attention that the angel round got, we got quite a lot of inbound interest from VCs, just because kind of future of work and kind of productivity tools is a hot thing these days. That kind of got quite a lot of inbound interest, and we actually kind of in early 2019 we were in the unusual spot of being able to choose between a few potential investors to work with on the seed round. So we raised another $3.5 million, which is, by that time I'd raised more than double what we raised for data markets throughout the entire journey there. And then used that again to kind of, build a team. We've managed to kind of assemble a team of really kind of, A players here in the Icelandic market. And the kind of team that people look to, and they know they want to work with these people because they can learn from them. And that's really kind of snowballed from there. And then we set out early this year to raise a Series A. Still had kind of 18 months of runway, so we're doing that quite early, kind of just testing the waters. And then, even though COVID kind of set things a little bit, like changed the way we approached it a little bit, we pretty much kind of got there on the time that we set out for ourselves, and actually ended up raising more money than we wanted, or than we set out to raise. Let's put it that way. So we raised another $12 million from NEA, one of the kind of big prestigious US funds. The great partners, they're also kind of, they come in with so many other things than just the money. There are people that are so well connected, and there are people there, like they've assembled a team of 6 people that are kind of focused on us as an investment, and they include people that have built go-to-market efforts at companies like Salesforce, like New Relic, like Box.com. And just having that, especially because I'm super focused, like I've said to the team the entire time, I know we can build this product, but go-to-market is really kind of where that's the hard part. And getting kind of getting in expertise from people that have done that and kind of done that really successfully with a similar kind of go-to-market approach as we're aiming for is fantastic.
So you guys raised $12 million, Series A. And what I thought was very cool about your blog Medium post was that you made a statement that was, a lot of people might have missed that. Getting an investor partner who has the same conviction as you about the future is probably 90% of the journey. Because any investor can look at data and then say, okay, I can see where this is going, I can bet on that. But somebody who has conviction about the future and then partnering with somebody like that to actually raise this kind of money is very important. Probably very few founders in Iceland have done that so far. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in some ways I kind of look at investments as happening on a spectrum between kind of purely based on metrics, like you have the traction, it's easy to kind of project where you're going, and it's just math. And then you have on the other end, pure conviction, where you just, there's an idea and there's a team and you just know they'll pull it off. And then obviously kind of, and any angel investment is almost all conviction. Then you start kind of building a product and you start testing the waters a little bit, and you get more and more data of some sort, even though it's not necessarily revenue data or something else. And then you start moving from the conviction end of the spectrum to the traction end. and kind of it's when you are, the more conviction is involved, the more important it is that you get the exact right people that have already thought about the market, have already thought about the space and the opportunity and so on. And we happen to find that in NEA. We also spoke to other investors that kind of also kind of got that, but where some of them fell off for other reasons. It wasn't the right time for them or something like that. But in general, like just I think that one of the things that people don't realize is that a VC investor is not, one VC investor is not like the next one. I think some people think that if they have kind of a network of 3 to 5 VCs, then they're golden. That's good. But if you are seeking for somebody, especially somebody with a high conviction in a special space, or just kind of more than just a general knowledge of the market. You have to have a lot of leads, and you have to kind of weed through them with quite a lot of effort. We had about 110 funds that we had in our pipeline. Spoke to, and when I say spoke to, actually had one or more calls with about 70, and that kind of led to maybe 10 to 12 people having high interest in what we were doing, and then we ended up with that one great partner that we ended up signing with.
No, that's fantastic, and this is one of the insights that a founder can only talk about.
Right.
Everybody writes about it, everybody can talk about it, but when you actually hear somebody actually going through the journey of how this works, it becomes a lot more real.
Right.
I want to maybe jump back a little bit. You'd raised money in data market, and now you basically are focusing more on the grid.
Yep.
And Naval Ravikant, who's the founder of AngelList, my previous guest Kevin, we talked a little bit about Naval has all these pith wisdoms about angel investing.
Right.
And in one that he refers to, second time founders have already identified the market risk.
Right.
And there is no execution risk because they've already figured out how to execute. So that's why they can get funded much more easier.
Right.
Whereas first time founders, there's execution risk and market risk and product risk. You have no idea whether they can build it, whether they can pull it off, or they can actually deliver on the market.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because you were referring to it when you're talking about NEA. You're talking about go-to-market. So you already have realized that you can build it, so there's no execution risk.
Right.
The big part is the market risk.
Yeah.
And
which is also execution.
Exactly.
Execution on the go-to-market side. I think that the product-led companies in general, and I think even kind of an effect that's a little bit amplified by the Icelandic market is that there is people underestimate how important it is to kind of properly take things to market. I was totally there. Like with my first company, absolutely, and like even with data market, we thought we were kind of, we thought we were giving it enough attention, but it should have happened a lot earlier, and we should have been a lot more methodical about kind of the go-to-market and the sales and so on. I think I started to appreciate this after kind of moving to the States with data market in 2012. When I hired just a couple of people, we were more enterprisey than we are kind of at Grid in data market. And I hired kind of an enterprise sales guy to work with me. And I kept on being the main salesperson, but having him besides me, kind of knowing how to pull the levers and kind of how to think about the whole approach was just so educational to me. And that's kind of when I started having a proper respect for that sales and go-to-market in general is it's a science. It is methodical, and you have to kind of really be thoughtful.
I always say this because in Iceland we are a little bit spoiled because we are a small market. You don't have to really be so methodical rather than just knock on every door, and then the first guy who buys it, you're more or less home.
Yep.
But then it kind of limits what you can do, and that's what's so exciting for me, because in the last decade I've noticed founders actually spending a lot of time thinking about this bigger approach to market and going after that.
Yeah. We had, so for example, with Grid, I had done quite a lot of go-to-market experiments before writing a single line of code.
Yeah.
Just to kind of understand if there is really kind of, if there is a demand for the product, or kind of how people are just thinking about the space in general. And I think that was, that's super important. We've built that in. We have had, we still call it an educational budget because we haven't launched the product yet. but we spent a few $1,000s a month on advertisements just to kind of understand what type of messaging works. How does this channel work versus that channel? Where do we find our target audience?
Exactly.
So
I mean, all that has become a lot more easier to do nowadays, primarily because all the platforms have kind of made it a lot more simpler, but still there's a lot of science in it. You got to run a lot of experiments, you got to figure this out. So maybe jumping a little bit forward into the human element, the inspiration part.
Yep.
Because the goal of what we're trying to do through this video cast is that we want to inspire people to say, you know what, you can actually go build these great companies. Anybody can learn to do this, and it can be done from here in Iceland,
right,
which has been kind of like the mantra. Tell me, other than Oz, through the years, who has really inspired you to kind of step out of your comfort zone?
Right. Back then it was, like we talked about, it was probably coming from Oz and kind of, that kind of early tech sector era. Also kind of, not only locally, but then you kind of realize that in some ways this can be done anywhere, and then you start looking at kind of the bigger market. I think that, where I am today is largely inspired by Hans Rosling, though, the Swedish professor that really kind of showed people how you can in a fun and engaging way use data to change people's perception and kind of help them understand the world in a fundamental way. I remember that I decided when I saw his most famous speech in 2006. That was the day I had been thinking about some kind of data related stuff, and that was the day I decided, okay, I'm gonna quit this job. I was working at Iceland Telecom at the time, and I'm gonna kind of go after this thing that I've been thinking about.
Always thinking about, I mean that's always a very pivotal movement in a lot of founders' journey. Yeah. And I always think about the beginnings, because those are very important. That kind of lays the foundation for how you look at everything after that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what's the next big challenge now that you've raised the 12 million? You have more than 18 months runway now. Yeah. How big is the team? So what are the things that you're thinking about in the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah. So we are there were 14 of us at the time we signed the term sheet. We are now kind of rapidly growing to 22. We'll hopefully be 22 before the end of next month. So that's happening fairly quickly, and that's actually my number one concern and the number one thing I kind of focus on now. That's just making sure that the team kind of gels together, both kind of, that we are not interrupting the team that was already here too much with all the new people coming in, and also making sure that we're integrating the new people properly into the company. So that's kind of the number one focus. Then there are essentially two other things that we keep our attention to. So we understand now who the initial target audience for the product is and what their use cases are. And that may sound funny that we understand that now. We had, with hunches, and we're not kind of, we had a fairly broad vision of who that was early on. But now we can identify these people pretty well, and we can talk to the exact value proposition that they are going after. So there are a few small features and kind of tweaks that we need to do, but mainly we actually need to lower again, we've already lowered the bar quite a lot when it comes to kind of the type of work that we're doing with visualization and interactivity from the tools that were there before. But we have to do even more. We have to get down to the level that we like to joke that anybody that uses Excel and can put 2 photos with their Facebook post, not just one, they are kind of our target audience. So that's kind of the level of web savvy that we're going for, and we're definitely not there yet. So lowering the bar on usability, and then we believe we'll be ready to start sales early next year.
On the team front, so 22 people is the number you're going after now. Yeah. How has COVID changed how you hire teams? What is your view on hiring teams outside of Iceland? Right. How are you thinking about these things now?
So that's actually a great question, because I was living in Boston when I decided to start Grid. And Boston is on any list of kind of top 10 cities in the world to start companies. And Reykjavík is not yet on any of those lists. But still, I found that for my journey, Reykjavík was the right place. And the reason was that here I have a network of creators and network of people that have worked with me. And proven that they want to work with me again.
Sure.
So I knew I could come here. I knew roughly the shoulders I wanted to tap to kind of get on the early team to get this built. And I didn't have that type of network in Boston. Both I didn't have so many creators in my network in Boston. There were a lot of kind of mid-level managers. There were a lot of financial people and so on, but not kind of people hands-on creating stuff. And that I could get here. And then we made a deliberate decision that we are going to be a company that has a strong headquarters, like has a strong office and an office culture. Just because early on, I really believe in being in the same room, being able to draw on the whiteboard, being able to kind of quickly
the human interaction.
Have all the quick human interaction that you need is super important for getting things done this early on. Now, COVID proved to us that even though we kind of relied quite a lot on being in one place, we could work remotely. Like we went overnight. We went from so there were a couple of weeks where we were like, okay, you can optionally work from home, and then we went from, okay, you can optionally come into the office, and there were a few weeks that there were only 2 or 3 people in the office.
Sure.
But we're just so used to kind of being on Slack already, so used to being on Zoom already at that time that it went okay, but I wouldn't have we were just so spoiled then that that only went on for about 6 weeks here. Yeah. So we were kind of really happy to get back in the office together. Yeah. Then the idea is to we'll keep building the core IP and kind of the headquarters, the strategy kind of head of the company in Iceland. But we also know that when it comes to kind of building out a sales team, that will probably happen in the US initially, and then when it comes to having maybe even more engineering talent, then that may happen somewhere else, maybe Eastern Europe.
Very cool. Not only that, you've also become an expert for raising money through Zoom now.
Right.
Which is always good. It's always a good skill.
It was actually fun to know that the term sheet we signed with NEA was the first fully remote deal they ever did.
Oh wow, pretty cool. Yeah. So it's a first for everything. Yeah. All right. So now that we talked a little bit about Grid and all that, so personal ambitions, personal vision. What drives you? I know the company mission, the team mission is one. Yep. But what drives you?
So I like to create things. So like I love being able to kind of see something in my mind's eye, and then whether it's a day later, a month later, or several years later, have that come to fruition. That's kind of what drives me and what gives me pleasure. The other thing that's kind of giving me more and more kind of fulfillment over time is just putting together teams of highly skilled people and seeing them perform. And kind of, I will fully admit that in my first startup, I didn't think at all about kind of the human element in this, but now I'm convinced that that's 90% of it.
Right.
So, I've shifted my focus a lot to there, and we take pride here in like we have an in-house team coach that kind of comes and kind of helps the teams. They also kind of individual coaching if people want it, and making sure that we have a culture where people have psychological safety. Anybody can ask questions without anyone else thinking they're stupid questions.
Right.
And surface issues really fast. And that's a great culture to have. And it's also like you realize that there are a lot more problems that you would otherwise think, just because when people are willing to surface them, they come up all the time and you can deal with them immediately, rather than them kind of being under the surface and
then
maybe festering for a while, and you don't know why things aren't working.
Yeah, building effective teams. That's one of the big reasons why I went into investing. Yep. Because you can have a kind of dispassionate view about it. Right. Because you're not part of the team, but still you want them to win. So it's kind of like a very coachish view about investing with teams, and that's what inspires me to see some teams that we bet on just go all the way.
I totally agree. And actually one of the things that has surprised me is that you don't think that you have a lot to teach or a lot to kind of say. But then when you kind of start talking to people that haven't been through the same journey, you realize, oh, no, I recognize that pattern. I can tell you this is not going to work, or something like that. And you didn't have a clue, but now all of a sudden you...
Yeah. So maybe to finally wrap things up, just to, words of advice, what would you want the next generation of founders, maybe going back to, your early days. I'm pretty sure there's lots of founders who are watching this.
Right.
What would be your word of, maybe not advice, maybe what would you tell yourself, when you're starting out?
Right. So I think we've kind of touched on the two things. So, and this is not only kind of for selfish reasons, kind of that you should be focusing on, A, the team, and two, the go-to-market. In my experience, the thing that, if you're looking for investment, the thing that investors look at, especially early on, is, number one, team. Above everything else, is this a team that I believe can pull this off? And then they look at the kind of what I like to call the thesis, like what's the market you're operating in, how are you going to sell this, and so on. And then kind of the product, what you've built, comes like in third place or fourth place. Yeah. And that's kind of, I think that's the fundamental, like, a lot of people are going to listen to this and they're going to say no, the product, the idea is so important. In reality, it isn't. So, and that's a big mental shift.
Yeah, I had a good conversation with an institutional investor, and I was talking to them about my thesis and what has worked in the last 10 years, and a lot of my pitches is focused on the founders and the founding team. How that kind of defines how the team develops, how everything moves, and they were like, "Oh, you would not spend time about the idea." And I was like, no, I think if you basically bet on smart people, they will figure that part out. Yeah. Right? You don't have to figure that out. The hard part is seeing the gelling, the chemistry of the team, how they work together and how they solve problems together. Because this is a journey of lots of ups and downs. Yeah. You got to have that maturity to go through it.
And it's going to take a long time. When you go, working with somebody, whether they're co-founder or your investor or somebody, one of the kind of key questions is this somebody that I want to be around for 5 to 10 years? Yeah. Because that's what you are signing up for.
Exactly. That's exactly what you're signing up to. Hjalli, thank you very much. It was fun talking to you, catching up, and hopefully we'll do more of this when you get to the next stage with Grid.
Yeah. Likewise. Thanks, Bala.
Thanks. Thank you.